Hello yogis, my name is April and welcome to the Yoga Ranger Studio and welcome to our practice today. Today is a yin yoga snack for quadriceps. This would be the front of your thighs, this whole big section through here, one of the biggest muscle groups in the body. A lot of strength here and also a lot of tension for a lot of people. So sometimes we focus on the hamstrings a lot, maybe not as much on the front of the thighs, but this is definitely a place to really kind of dive into for any kind of hip flexor opening and the front of the hips opening and the front of the belly opening to give a little balance to your body overall. So you don't need any props for this practice, but because my knees are sometimes a little bit sensitive, I've put a blanket underneath. You can always use a blanket underneath for our poses. I am going to point out that these poses are a bit stronger, so make adjustments and use whatever props you need. That could be a bolster or blocks or a blanket or two for your knees and for your ankles. But these are two of my favorite poses to use for this space specifically. And these are the ones I always use pretty much every time I practice. These are the ones I include in my practice because this is a very tight, tense spot for me. So coming into our first pose, come on to your knees. Take your right foot out in front. Take that back leg back a little bit and then pull yourself forward so you can get onto the top end of your kneecap. We're going to start up high here. So a high dragon really focuses on opening the space on both thighs. So we're looking at both thighs, one opening, one compressing, taking your hands on top of your right thigh. If this is too much for you, you can always take your hands to blocks or a chair or a wall. You can put more cushioning under your back knee or a block or bolster with your knee hanging off the end so it's a little bit more comfortable. Taking some nice deep breaths. Making any adjustments in these first few breaths, using whatever props you need. And whether this be a favorite pose of yours or a not favorite pose of yours, acknowledging that it has some really wonderful benefits for opening the hips, the lower back, the front of the thighs. Extending your exhale a little bit longer than your inhale. Just one more minute. Noticing whatever comes up for you, noticing how your breath shifts and changes in a pose like this that is a little bit more of our more yang yin poses. And then gently taking your hands down to the floor, very slowly and mindfully shifting back, coming into downward facing dog or child's pose, whichever makes more sense for you and your body today. Walking your dog out if you're in downward facing dog. Even softly shifting your hips side to side in child's pose or downward facing dog. Notice the space you may have made in the front of your left thigh, hip. Maybe even noticing how nice it is to be out of the pose. And then wherever you're at, coming back onto your knees and shifting to the other side. Walking that left leg out. I like to take my fingertips down, step that back knee back a little bit further, and then pull it to me. And then coming up, left hand on your thigh, right hand on top of it. Noticing how different this side may feel for you. This side for me is so much easier. Reconnecting with your breath, extending your exhale. Allowing to whatever comes up and moves through. Last minute here. Starting to take your hands down to the floor. Here again, slowly shifting back to child's pose, downward facing dog. Moving or being still, whatever feels best for you. Taking note of where your body feels a little bit more space now that you've opened up both sides. How does that feel? And then wherever you're at, coming back down onto your knees. So in this pose, you have a lot of variety here. You can take something underneath your ankles, a bolster behind your back, or blocks to support you. I'm going to lean forward just a little bit, and you're going to take your thumbs and roll the calf muscles out of the way. Your heels can be on either side of your hips for saddle pose, or they could be underneath your hips, which may feel better for some people. Your knees can go wide, they can come off the floor. Any of these is fine wherever you find yourself. If you have more mobility, you can come down onto your forearms. If you have lots of space, maybe you feel like you can come down all the way to the floor or to a bolster. Whatever pose you're in, lift your hips just a little bit, tuck them underneath, and then lay them back down. This is going to put more focus on the front of the hips and the front of the thighs. If at any point you felt like you went a little too far, you can always come back up. You could even be seated in this pose and you'll still get a lot of stretch on the front of the quads, the thighs. Maybe after a few breaths, you find you can go down a little bit lower or all the way down. Just a few more breaths here. Then wherever you're at, tucking your elbows underneath, starting to walk your hands one at a time to lift yourself back up, leaning over to the left or to the right and swinging your legs all the way around out in front of you. Very slowly, very mindfully, no rush here. Here, swiveling the feet side to side. Often feels really good to bounce your knees a little bit after that. And remember that whatever version you're taking, whether that be supported with a bolster or blocks, halfway down, seated, all the way down to the floor, all of those are going to do exactly the same thing. So we're achieving the same thing with any of those poses. Wiggling your toes, waking them back up. And then coming into a seat. So those are my two favorite poses and the ones I probably use the most in my practice because I really want to open up this space. So it's a great focus area for me. Those are very strong poses, but they also are very efficient in doing exactly what you're looking for. There is some nice back bending in there, so opening up your lower back. It's also opening up your chest, the front of your body, the back side of your body, the hip flexors. So many spaces in just two poses, really easy to get into a lot of space. So use this whenever you need it, or use this as a supplement if you're working on kind of diving a little deeper into opening up your quadriceps or the front of your thighs a little bit more, your hip flexors. This is a great two poses to use on and off, or just to unwind tension throughout the body. If you can conquer the dragon, you can conquer anything, right? Thank you so much for joining me for this practice. Have a wonderful week.